I research patients with degenerative diseases and also study how just typical adults engage in processing words, processing objects. The left hemisphere has a system for understanding what words mean, call that verbal knowledge, and the hypothesis, at least, is that the right hemisphere has another system for storing nonverbal knowledge, just sort of visual imagery and objects, things like that. And so I see patients that have had one or two of these systems disrupted, and I try to characterize that. And I look at patterns of eye movements to see how they're recognizing words, how they're recognizing objects in subtle ways. The second prong is with Northwestern's Alzheimer's Disease Center. I'm an adjunct professor over there, and so they test patients that have aphasia and left hemispheric disease, lesions, and we look at their eye movements and relate that to patterns of atrophy with MRI. The third prong is the newest. I formed a collaboration with the Center for Brain Health at the Cleveland Clinic down the street. They see the much more rare right hemispheric lesions. And so then we predict that they're going to have problems when viewing objects, not when viewing words. You use a device like this where you can see millisecond by millisecond what a person is looking at as they're engaged in a task like that. We actually see the processing as it unfolds in real time, not just the final output or the final decision. And so you might see a patient, for example, that ends up touching the right object, the dog, but on the way to getting there, they've spent a lot of time, say several hundred milliseconds, looking at a related word like cat, and maybe they've even looked at the word dog, but then continued their visual search afterwards. That would be astonishingly rare for a typical adult to do, but if you had a brain disease, that's the kind of pattern that we'd see. So it's a much more sensitive indicator of dysfunction.
So my research really focuses on developing non-pharmacological interventions for people with cognitive impairment, including dementia, traumatic brain injury, and stroke, and their family caregivers. We also examine the illness experience of what it is to cope and manage with some type of cognitive impairment, and we also are in the process of developing a variety of training programs for individuals who work with individuals with dementia, such as physical therapists and occupational therapists and speech-language therapists as well. So one of my current research projects is funded by the Department of Defense, and I work with several colleagues in the Indianapolis VA and colleagues from the Indiana School of Medicine, where we've taken one of my lines of research called Project Answers, which stands for Acquiring New Skills While Enhancing Remaining Strengths, and one of their research projects interventions called the Aging Brain Care Program. And we've merged these interventions together in order to develop a more cohesive, holistic model of care for individuals with dementia or Alzheimer's disease and veterans with a traumatic brain injury. We target communication, we target cognition or how to manage memory, we target staying active, including cognition, physical and social engagement, and then the last key area we really focus on is understanding emotions and behaviors and how to best handle that for both individuals.
People with dementia are losing their cognitive memory, right? They're losing their names, their dates, things like that. But they seem to retain what we're calling affective memory. They may not know exactly who they were, but they knew the kind of person that they are. And they still interact with people on the basis of that. And we're trying to tap into that using a computer simulation of interaction to capture a person's affective memory and then not exactly train, but help people figure out how to interact with that person on the basis of their affective memory rather than what we usually think of as cognitive memory. And so we can take a person's past identities, roles, behaviors, relationships, and we can measure them, and we can come up with scores for those. And we can develop a probability distribution. Based on what they are doing, we can say, okay, what identity, essentially, are they coming from? We're kind of going out on a limb here, doing stuff that's not been done before.